QuickBooks Pro Desktop 2021 Bank Feeds? Let's get into it with Intuit's QuickBooks Pro Desktop 2021. Here we are on our desktop. We're going to be opening up the QuickBooks program and then opening up our Get Great Guitars navigation file that we set up last time, which is going to have our practice data in it. Notice that going forward, we won't actually open the program each time, but we want to start off by opening the program so that we can just get a feel for the opening of the program and the feel for the fact that the data file is going to be separate than the QuickBooks program. Last time we opened up the data file, which is similar to opening up like a Word document as compared to Microsoft Word, which then opened up the program. In the case of a Word document, it would open up the Word program. In our case, it opens up QuickBooks, and then it opens up the data file within it, which actually has the information, which in the case of Microsoft Word would be the Word document. In our case, it'd be in the QBW file. This time, we're going to be opening up QuickBooks, which will generally open up the last file that we had open, in this case, that being this QBW file for the Get Great Guitars. Or, if that were not open, then we can locate that, we can navigate to that. There's a few different ways that we can navigate to that file. So as you can see here, it's trying to go to that file, to the last file we had open. Now, if I didn't want to open that file, I can just say, let's close this up. I don't want to go into that file. Then it would give us the navigation screen up top to the files that were previously opened. And we can simply open it there. Or if we know where the file is and it's not located here, we can go to the drop down up top. We can go to the open and restore. And this time, instead of restoring, as we did when we first restored the file, we would go to open, and then we would have to find the file location on our system. Closing this back out. Also note that if you hover over these files in here, it'll actually tell you where they are located on your system with that mapping, which is useful, especially when you create a new file, because QuickBooks might put it in some location where you don't know exactly where it is, and then this can help you to navigate to it to know where it is. So I'm going to open it this time by just double-clicking on this Get Great Guitars navigation file, which should now open up the file from QuickBooks. So now, like QuickBooks, like Microsoft Word is reaching out to the data file, like Word would be reaching out to the Word document, QuickBooks reaching out to the QBW file to actually populate the data within the program. I'm going to type in the password, which is GGG1234, GGG1234. The normal process when opening up the file, then I'm going to maximize the home page here. I'm going to go to the view dropdown and go to the open windows list, which will provide the open windows to the left, which right now I only have the home page open. If your home page is not open for any reason, you can go to the company dropdown, open up the home page. When you maximize these items, make sure you're maximizing these that open up in the gray area of the window and not clicking this one, which will maximize the entire program of QuickBooks. So that'll take a little bit of time to kind of get straight, but once you have that, not a problem. Just want to mention here the bank feeds, because oftentimes many people, when they start using QuickBooks, and it's often marketed in this format as well, to the idea that you can basically just upload the QuickBooks, just connect the QuickBooks to the bank, and then basically everything will work for itself from that point forward, and it's all self-navigated at that point. That's not necessarily the case, but I can see why people would get kind of that idea. You know, even the names QuickBooks, I'm just gonna, put this in and connect it to the bank, and everything will like move from there. That's not necessarily the case. Now, the bank feeds are available on QuickBooks Desktop. You can use bank feeds, which means that QuickBooks will connect to the bank. It's going to be in the banking, and then you go to the bank feeds, and you could set up the bank feeds here. We will have a full section on the bank feeds, and we'll do that all the way after we do the practice problem. So we're going to do the practice problem without the bank feeds, and then we'll do another section after that that will focus in specifically on bank feeds. The reason we do this is because most companies are going to have to think through how your bank feeds will fit into your accounting system. In other words, if you're going to be completely dependent on the bank and just wait till everything clears the bank before you record it in the QuickBooks system, and you're just going to be on a cash basis and just wait till it clears the banks and then record everything, that's the easiest way to kind of use bank feeds, and you might be able to kind of move forward fairly quickly if that's going to be the system that you are using. However, many people are going to use some kind of accrual type of concepts and go through more of the accrual flowchart, meaning they might have accounts receivable. They might want to track who owes them money. They might be using the invoicing function here. Even if they're not really using it to track the accounts receivable, they'll start to create invoices and whatnot to bill clients, and that will create transactions in the system. And if you don't know what's happening and you just start to download all the bank feeds into the system, then you're going to end up with a lot of data, and you may not know what exactly is going on or how to input that data, because it's not as straightforward as you think. So in other words, if you want to take a look at the bank feeds, it's going to be at the bottom after we go through the whole practice course, and then you can look at the bank feeds. But I recommend learning the accounting cycles first, especially if you're a bookkeeper, especially if you're in an accounting system that's going to be using some accrual concepts, meaning you expect to be using accounts receivable and accounts payable, for example. You expect to actually be using the tracking of who owes you money and who you owe money to, as well as payroll. You want to make sure you understand how your payroll transactions are going to be fitting in to like the bank feeds. So what the bank feeds will do, they will basically connect to the bank, and you can download the banking transactions. However, when you download the banking transactions, the banking data into the QuickBooks system, I'll call it banking data at that point, it has not been input into QuickBooks in terms of the financial reports yet at that point in time of download, because it's in there in kind of a limbo. I will call it a limbo area, the bank feeds limbo area, until you have approved it and put it into the system, into QuickBooks. Now, in order to approve the data that you put into the system, you're going to have to know kind of the flow that is happening here, so you can know, because when you put it into the system, even when it's coming from the bank feeds, it's going to be in alignment with some of these forms, meaning you can have check type forms for the decreases in the banking, in the cash transactions and whatnot. So you're going to have to still know what these forms basically do, because when you download the bank feeds, it's still going to be basically utilizing these forms, even though in essence, the transactions are basically like entered directly into the register. It's as if you entered them directly into the register, because all you have is the banking information, which is basically the bank register information. But even if you write a decrease in the bank register or use a journal entry to do it, QuickBooks will, use a register, which is kind of like a journal entry. QuickBooks will typically still default to the forms, which will be like a check type form for a decrease there. Also note that if you have some kind of system like this where you're using the accounts receivable, if you are invoicing customers, then when you invoice the customer, you're entering a transaction that doesn't have cash affected, but it does affect the financial statements, meaning an invoice to the customer where we have not yet received cash will increase accounts receivable, and the other side will go to sales. Then we will have to receive the cash, and we have to think about how we're going to get cash. Is it all going to be through the checking account, electronic transfers? Are we going to get actual checks that we will have to then deposit into the bank? And then we want to think about how we're going to group those payments into the bank, which is when it actually hits the checking account, which here is the information that we would get from the bank. So the bank would give us this information. Now, again, if we were just to wait until the end of the transaction and just record basically our revenue at the point in time we receive it from the bank, just taking it from the bank, then we can use a system like that, but then we're completely dependent on the bank. So that might work for you, but just realize then you're in a system that's not a full accounting process system. You're basically constructing your books from the information from the bank. Usually, you would have to tie it into these accrual transactions, right? You'd have the invoice, non-cash transaction, receive payment. You got to think about how you're going to receive it. It might hit the bank at this point, and then put it into the bank. And this deposit then needs to somehow tie out to the invoice and or the receive payment kind of transactions. So again, if you haven't really thought that out and you just basically connect to the bank and you just download all the banking transactions and try. First step is you'll connect to the bank, and then it'll download all the banking transactions, and you might think, okay, I'm done. I downloaded all the banking transactions. No, you won't be done at that point, because then you have to basically assign the banking transactions into the system to basically record them into the system. And that's usually where people will get overwhelmed if they don't understand the process yet, because they won't know how to assign them into the system. And so what you want to do is you want to get a basic understanding of your accounting process first, and then use the bank feeds to help you to fit into that accounting process. And so that's what we recommend doing. So that's how the course will be constructed. We will talk about the navigation. Then we'll do 2 months of data entry without bank feeds, doing just the normal accounting process, and we will do bank reconciliations. And then we'll have bank feeds after that point in time talking about how to set up the bank feeds and how the bank feeds work and how you can enter data using the bank feeds so that you can then think about that data and how it will fit into your particular cash flow. Are you on a cash basis? Are you on an accrual basis? Are you utilizing accounts receivable or accounts payable or not? Can you depend directly on the bank, or do you need more information on your side that you have to enter that are not just the cash transactions? So those are the kind of questions you want to go through. But if you have a very basic kind of setup and you're thinking you're just going to construct your financials from the bank, or you're looking particularly into bank feeds and you already have an understanding of your accounting process, then you can jump all the way down to the bank feeds section where we go over, setting up the bank feeds and the typical different kind of transactions with relation to the bank feeds, just how to use them and how to add those transactions into the system.